In the Bible, the story of David, the shepherd boy that killed the giant Goliath. Maybe over time, we've overlooked some of the finer details of this story. I think a lot of people often assume that he was a bit of an ungainly teenager, and when he went into battle, that he wasn't battle ready or didn't really know how to fight. Some people seem to think he went randomly forward with the Spirit of God, but acted rashly, maybe even stupidly, a bit crazy, not level-headed at all. But he did great things in the name of God. He was nuts, but he did great. This is not at all true. David was a fighter and a man of war from his youth. A few key facts can be seen about David in the Bible. It says on the battlefield he was described as ruddy and good-looking. Some translations even say he was beautiful to look at. So when you see a gazelle violently disemboweled by a lion, lying as a rotting carcass in the sun with its ribcage exposed, do you see it as beautiful? Or a wildebeest limping with every step because of the deep gashes of the paws of a bear that severed the sinews and tendons of its giant powerful legs, do you think, wow, that's beautiful? When you see something deeply scarred from battle with those visual reminders so evident, does it scream out to you as gorgeous? No. Even a single gash from a lion's paw or a bear's claws will leave lasting lifetime damage on your body, your face, or any body part unlucky enough to come into contact with it. Yet David was described as beautiful. So that must have meant that the lion and the bear he fought mustn't have hurt him at all. An interesting thing to think about is that David was given the job to look after sheep by his father Jesse. He worked deep in the wilderness, secluded from society, and it was in this seclusion that he spent a great deal of time with God. But the wilderness also held many inherent dangers, especially for a young teenager. His father Jesse would have known of these dangers, and yet he still sent his son to do this job. Why? Because Jesse also believed in God and could see the Spirit of God resting on his son and evident in his life. He knew that God was with his son David. Jesse was also there the day Samuel the prophet anointed David to be king, the one who would rule justly over the people of God. Jesse knew David's destiny and believed in God and his son David. Jesse trusted God with his son. I'm sure he'd also seen many other times that his son David was a little bit different to normal boys. During this time David was a shepherd boy, he did come across two very real dangers to the sheep and to himself. One was a lion and one was a bear, both of which were carnivorous beasts of the wild, both of which would easily tear any teenager limb from limb and make a quick lunch out of him. Yet they never even touched him. Why was that? Why didn't they even sink a paw into his soft flesh? Why? Because greater is he that was in him than those in the world. Whatever came against David and his task, greater was what was inside him. He had a much greater purpose than to die a meal of a wild beast. God knew that and fought alongside him. God didn't even let him be harmed at all. David had a fire inside him that was so hot it consumed him. It says in the book of Psalms, "For zeal of your house I am consumed." This was written by David. He loved God's people so much, long before he led them as king. Even while he was a forgotten shepherd boy writing psalms and songs in the wild that he wasn't sure anyone would ever hear. He loved God's people with all his heart, and this is why God chose David to be king, because of his shepherd's heart. David acted from his love, and it was this same heart that fought to protect the sheep of his family that God used when he became king. He had a shepherd's heart, a protector's heart. When the lion and the bear came, he knew that what was in him was stronger than them. It was not humanly possible to kill a lion and a bear up close as a teenager, not without serious ranged weaponry, yet he fought up close, personal. He beat a lion and a bear in the most dangerous way, by confronting them head on, and he never even got a scratched. He's described before Goliath as beautiful, almost like nothing had ever happened to him before this day, like he'd never ever seen battle. But that was far from the truth. He knew full well what battle was like. He'd fought a lion that could have easily killed a normal man, and a bear that would have easily torn him to shreds. Yet he trusted in the God that was in him. He trusted that God would provide and prevail over anything that came his way. So when he stood before Goliath, it wasn't random. It wasn't random at all. It was completely and totally planned. It was 100% settled in his heart what he was there to do. He went there to take the head off that giant. And that's why he stood there in the face of an incredible being of destruction, a fearsome war machine, a man of war since his youth that had killed thousands of men, a giant that could crush and hurl any soldier. And he went there completely, fully purposed to take his head off. The most interesting part of this story is that David didn't go into battle with any sword or any dagger. Yet, he made a statement that he would take the giant's head off. Why? Because he planned right from the start to take Goliath's own sword and use it against him to sever his head from his body. He fully planned to hold up that head to show the people of God that God exists, He is real, He is powerful, He hears, and He lives in the hearts of those that love Him. So today, believe in the God that exists in you. David was a special person used for a very special task. He did truly great things in God's name, and in the name of the Lord he took off giants' heads that oppressed and tormented the freedom of his people. The Spirit of God rested upon David and was with him in all that he did. This was very rare back in those days. But things have changed. It says in the Bible that in the last days I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh. David was truly special. But now all of us have the ability to be special. All of us are called to be special and do great things for God. All of us are called to be vessels of the Spirit of God. All of us can do great things for the kingdom of heaven. We are the catalyst. We must believe. That is all that God asks. Believe. Jesus said, all things are possible to them that believe. We must believe that God is greater. We must believe that God will prevail. We must believe that God will provide. We must believe that God hears. We must believe that God has the victory, and He is with us.